Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
Hey there, if you like wine, spirits and talking booze in general, then here's a cool podcast for you. Check out Drinks and Destinations, a podcast where Rojita and Samira talk about wines, spirits and where they come from. Isn't that cool? So check out new episodes every Monday on the IVM Podcast app or any other podcasting app out there. Happy listening.
You're listening to Keeping It Queer with Naveen Narona.
Hello and welcome everybody to Keeping It Queer. And today we have a special guest in our studio. I say that to every guest actually, but then you feel good that way. We have Sakshi here today, the founder of the Gazy family, and everybody knows you to some extent. And we'll learn more about your life today on this podcast. First of all, welcome Sakshi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to the show. And we always dive right into the guest's early life, and I want you to just shoot. What was your early life like?
I had a good life, yeah. It's been good all along, with little ups and downs to keep it interesting. If you want to talk about queer life, to be very honest, with me, it was, and I've probably said this 100 times, I never had that shit, I'm gay moment.
Correct.
I feel bad about it sometimes because I don't have a fantastic story to
all
share.
All the drama you missed out on.
Yeah, that kind of like, hi, zindagi kharab ho gayi, ab main kahan jaun, muh dikhane ke layak nahi, those kind of things. For me, right from a very early age, I would say about 11 or so, I was attracted to women. From 13, I kind of started acting on it. It was very easy flowing. I had
the women or the feeling?
Both. Like I said, it's been good. Both, in the sense that, like I said, for me it was never that, oh my God, why am I feeling this? Is it wrong? I didn't even have the knowledge or the language for it.
So for most teenagers, like the first part of, finding out about their origin or like the sexuality part of it, it's like they don't have a term that they can put on it and they don't have any knowledge. So that kind of is a very weird dilemma to be in at that point. So you didn't have any of that?
No, I never questioned it. For me, it was like, okay, I'm attracted and go for it kind of a thing. Or it was more like probably because it was a mutual attraction. So it was not that the other person had apprehensions or inhibitions or was like no kind of a thing. So maybe if that was the case, I would have stopped and thought or something like that. But it wasn't like that for me. So there was no questioning. And like I said, I had no language for it. So again, for me, it was like, okay, this is what I'm feeling. And therefore, I'm acting on it. And that's about it.
So then you were 13 at this point, you said?
I mean, from 11 or so. And like I said, from 13, it's like you kind of...
You get to like...
Yeah. You
experiment a little bit.
Yeah, there a little bit. Yeah.
So then how did life go ahead from there? Like, was it like for you to tell your parents, do you have to come out to them, or was it like... No,
I did not. I actually came out to my family much later. Much later. For me, like I said, it was... so I was with women on also breakups would happen like any other teenager and things like that, but it was a very under the table kind of a thing. So in a group of all friends, there are two of us seeing each other kind of a thing, and breakup happens, one goes away, and you kind of like, okay, we fell apart kind of things like that. And then I went overseas to study. I was there for about 8 years.
Which part of the world was
I was in Australia.
Oh, Australia.
So it was good there too. But
I hear that. I think everybody's gone to Australia has come back with some really great report about
I mean, I went very early when this is back in 97, 98. So that is the time when Indians were invited in Australia for education and things like that. That's when it was picking up.
population balance over there.
मतलब वो तभी इंडियंस का असली रूप दिखा नहीं था उनको, तो इसीलिए बड़े खुशी मंगा रहे थे हम लोग को वहाँ पे.
बाद में हुए भी दंगे काफी कुछ.
But so in a sense, even then I was in the closet, but I had that other life which I was going about. It's not that I stopped or something.
You were living with roommates over there. How was it?
I had the two best flatmates, two Australian guys who were my flatmates for the last 3 years at least. I was there for 8 years, so last 3 years they were my flatmates, and the best, better than Indians. I'm sorry to say that, but so even then it was in the closet, but I still hooked up with women, had friends, queer friends and things like that.
And none of these of the two guys ever made a move on you?
No.
Really nice.
One of them had a very possessive girlfriend, so he was pretty watchful.
Yeah.
The other one was very close. He's we've met families and things like that and all that. And then I did not want to come back, but due to situation at home, I had to come back, join family business. That was the time when I got into blogging.
Okay.
That was again heyday of blogging.
So what was your educational background?
I did my bachelor's in business.
Okay.
Then I did my master's in computer graphics.
So all of this was down under?
Everything there. Then I came back and got into family business, took over marketing and sales department of our brand. So when I came back, it was more like, after spending 8 years over there, it was more like, here I have to start my life again in terms of making friends, and if you're in a family-run business, there is no scope of meeting new people or,
That's true.
being friends or
the
things
same
like
uncle,
that.
auntie, chacha, chachi, peri bona, the usual.
Yeah, you have to maintain a certain level of
Decorum.
Exactly. So you can't do those things. So that's when I took up to blogging. I was anyways very vocal, very talkative. So got down to writing, and those were the heydays of blogging. I'm talking about back in 2007, 8, 9.
When bloggers got proper Twitter followers.
No, there was no Twitter then.
Back then, yeah. But
That
then
was just blog. There was just blogging.
Now everybody's a blogger. So
yeah.
that's the problem.
So
initially, like when you were blogging, what was the kind of frame of mind you had? Like you want to write something?
That time I used to blog under my own name. And again, I was pretty vocal. I used to love writing about movies and things like that. Not much on sexuality, but I did write a lot on gender-related issues. So whether it's domestic violence, the marriage pressure that we, at least women face.
That's true.
In Indian households. So things like that. And it kind of, over a couple of months, a year or so, it kind of grew a little popular. So... and I made a lot of friends.
To the blog virtual world?
Through the virtual world.
That was a great time to be alive.
Exactly. And in fact, me and another friend of mine, we started hosting Bloggers Meet in Bombay. We had I think in the span of 2 years, we did about 4 or 5 of them.
Because there's an entire undercurrent of bloggers who were talking about issues that nobody else was talking about. And the freedom of having the computer, be able to write on that.
Yeah, what blog did that back then was, what your social media, like Facebook and all does now, right? Yeah. So it's sharing of information, whether it's personal, intimate, whatever, with people far off, like probably in Timbuktu kind of a thing, it kind of blurs boundaries and stuff like that. So you can connect with people, kind of feel a little grounded when you read stories or share stories with other people going through similar situation as you.
Yeah.
And so, when I was doing blogging and all, obviously whole queer agenda was nowhere in sight for me. That happened around, I think, in 2008. So I had a breakup. Just immediately after the breakup, I kind of came out to my siblings.
How many of them are there?
Brother, sister.
Okay.
One took it kindly. One was a bit...
Okay. Are you the youngest?
I'm the youngest.
That's the worst. Because then everybody's full of advice about how to lead life.
No, but then I feel you get away also with a lot of things when you're youngest.
No, I'm the youngest and I've never gotten away with anything.
I've been lucky again. So when I came out, I kind of took some time out from work. I went on a long vacation.
And you told him not to tell your folks, right? Your siblings, or was it
No, they only told me we won't tell them. My dad had passed away by then, my mum. So they said, we'll hold it on from there. And so I said, okay, fine, I need to go on a break, need some time out, kind of a thing. And so I went to US to my best friend. I was there for about 1.5 months or so. And during then, not really then, but I have always, a couple of months before that, I had this idea of creating, again, having a blog with multi-author blog wherein we share stories of queer women. And that kind of came more in forefront when I came out, because all of a sudden I felt this urge of being around queer people. Not romantically or anything like that, but just being around.
The sense of belonging is
exactly. Or more like, it's like, okay, there are more people like me.
That's true.
Like, I just needed to know that.
It grounds you again.
Exactly.
Just like the blog, the fact that you belong to a community that is striving for the same thing that you are striving for, kind of gives you that kind of, that sense of relatability.
Exactly. It's more like, okay, there are people who can understand me. For me, it was more like that. So there was a lot of content online, but then again, that was not India. not Indian. It didn't have any Indianness to it. So for me, it was more like, okay, there is a lot of content on queer women out there, but it is from a very foreign perspective, and I wanted something Indian. I needed to relate to the background of the story, or the story where it is set in, that could understand the Indian sensibilities and navigate through them. So I always wanted to create an online space for that. So I'd spoken to a friend or two who were queer and again into blogging. So when the whole breakup happened and when I went on a break, that's when I kind of put Gacy into action. I had time on hand. So I utilized in creating a blog, getting as many queer women I knew, insisting that they get in touch with more queer women. And like this, we were like, I would
just like the girls just want to have fun kind of video thing playing in my head.
No.
And one more girl picked up the phone.
Fun to bahut dur ki baat hai. It was more like ki chal yaar, let's do something about it more kind of a thing, and then
Seriously,
fun. Yeah. And like I said, I mean, it's not that we are meeting or anything. It was more about let's just share our stories. You don't know where it's going to connect, because at that point in time, for me, that was just so important for me to read a story. Like I said, which spoke about Indian queer women kind of a thing. It could relate, so that I could relate to it. I could feel better, or I could see, that light and end of the tunnel kind of a thing. So for me, it was just that.
So what was the origin of the term Gacy? How did you think about that?
So this friend of mine with whom I started the blog, her name is Broom. I mean, she used to write with a handle called Broom. It was
called Broom.
because the closet, the broom, that kind of a thing.
We're all eventually furniture in some way or other.
True. So she said, let's come up with the term. So it was, so we thought about it, and then we decided so it's gay is obviously gay, and desi, so we mix the two and it becomes Gacy.
Oh, nice. So so when you were starting off, and over the years you've obviously heard so many stories, and the blog is still running, and it's running famously and people know about it, but from your experience, what is the difference between foreign LGBT women, and what is the difference between the Indian? Because where does the Indianness come into the picture?
See, it was not that. See, if you look outside of India, I mean, if you look at US or UK, Australia, wherever, most of these countries back then, so this is when Gacy started, was in 2008. So back then, these guys were still far ahead, right, in terms of the acceptance part of it. They used to have Pride March over there. They still had these hanging out spaces and stuff. It's not saying that there was no discrimination, but they were out there, and therefore there was discrimination. Wherein back in India, we were invisible. Right, so forget discrimination. We did not even exist.
Yeah, there was no chance of
exactly. I mean, I would say the first commercial sense the word queer. I mean, gay even came out was probably in Kalona Ho with Kanta Ben. So that's when it happened, and which was much later. So for us, it was like. So yeah.
I just wanted to talk about the Kanta Ben thing,
Yeah.
And that is something I still hold a grudge against Karan Johar for.
I don't.
Because I don't know, man. It was, see, when we were kids, you all laugh at it, and then you realize how easy it is to just imagine two men in bed and make gay assumptions.
Yeah, but you're looking at back in time, like I said, where people did not even know what is gay.
Yeah, but then isn't it laughing at it in a way that instead of being all cool about it?
No, but I think, being devil's advocate over here, I said, right, that time we needed to just say, hey, we exist kind of a thing. And he put it in a humor way, which is fine. At least he dared to do that, If you see, I think just like us, Karan Johar has pretty much grown in terms of his depiction
Correct.
of queer individuals' relationships in his films, whatever, Little Big. And so I think
my fascination is with the fact that he obviously uses the straight male actors in a situation where they are, in compromising positions, and everybody assumes that they're gay. That's the humor where it comes from, and it's lighthearted, obviously. But for a discriminated person, for example, somebody who's looking at it from a homophobic, glass, they'll obviously see ki hey, kya ho raha hai and all, and it's easy to mock. I'm just saying, even again, I understand where Karan Johar or what the perspective is, and it's easy for us to laugh because we understand the value.
See, those who want to be homophobic and mock, they will mock at anything, even if you're not depicting it in humorous way or anything. They'll see an effeminate gay man, they'll laugh at him, right? It's not that the guy is trying to be funny or anything like that. That's what he is. No humor, no nothing like that. But
Bollywood generally been a little more extremist with that, like if it's a effeminate trait, then it's way too effeminate, there's just like
but
pushing.
It's changing. See later,
changing, yeah.
So later on, it's like when it got to a point where it was, not just Karan, any other commercial Hindi film you would see, there would be one token gay person, the fashion designer or somebody there.
It's a Hollywood thing as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So then people kind of like started saying, hey, stop it. Then the perspective changed, right? Otherwise, why would the perspective...
You have to shoehorn the character down our throats, because for us, we're like... So even if it's a horror movie, for example, in a Hollywood movie, there'll be a black guy and a gay guy, and first the black guy dies and then the gay person dies. That's the usual trope.
No, but like I said, so back then it was more about, hey, we exist. Then the conversations changed to, okay, this is not what we are. We come in, we are different types, and this is the correct information. And now we are at a place where it's like, okay, it's not just gay men or lesbians for that matter. They are bisexuals, pansexuals, asexuals. So, that the queer umbrella is bigger. And, with respect to rights, we are more vocal. Now it's no more about, I would say, it's no more about just wanting decriminalization of Section 377, but it's also about saying that, hello, I want my rights. Whether it's to marry or, property for my partner, things like that. So everything is, it's changed with time. I personally feel that in India we are catching up in a pretty fast pace.
Yeah, now there's more public forums.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, looking back at 2009, so from 2009 to now, we've done quite a bit. And even after the 2013 verdict, it's not that the activism part or the sensitization part or even making difference through cultural spaces has stopped.
In fact, it actually grew more.
Exactly. I feel after 2013 verdict, you have more people out there.
That's what, yeah.
More people who are pissed off, more people who think, that I really don't give a damn now, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Society is more accepting. There are still conversations and all that. So I think,
Yeah, a lot of youngsters are now like taking the coming out process very seriously. They tell their parents and they desensitize them, they talk to them. I think it's a great space to be in. And but you also helped create a lot of these safe spaces through your events, and we'll talk about those in the second half of this podcast. We'll take a small break and we'll be back soon.
Every week comes a show where three people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on iTunes, Audio Boom, the IVM Podcast app, to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
Welcome back to Keeping It Queer. We're here with Sakshi and we're talking about Gezi. And so you said that, having a blog or having a story outlet for a lot of these young women who were talking about this back in the day was important. But while running a blog in a modern day is easy, financing it is difficult. So where does the finance aspect come in?
Beginning, we basically, whether it was pretty easy. There was not much expense involved in just hosting a blog and all that. So that I used to foot from the pocket. The expense part of it kind of grew once the blog grew bigger. I would say post 2011.
So on average, how many readers would you have in the start?
Beginning, I think we used to get like 40 page views in a day or 50
That's
pages.
Still good.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've grown from there. But the expense part of it came is we realized that we want, over the years when the blog grew, so it was not just catering to queer women per se, but a lot more people, a lot more sexualities, genders, people who wanted to talk about it, even supporters and allies. That grew. Then we wanted to streamline the content a little bit, then obviously with times, even the online content format started changing, right? So you had podcast and today you have videos and things like that. So that's where the expense kind of started going up. Earlier we used to depend totally on guest contributions. Today we have a couple of regular writers who we pay. not the market rate. We pay them whatever we can afford, kind of a
it's
thing.
It's a thought that counts.
Yeah, I would say. Yeah, I hope everyone thinks like that. So, that's where things like we want to do photography pieces, things like that. And then the bigger expense that comes for us is our yearly magazine, which is a print publication. So that takes a lot of money, for which we've done crowdfunding initiative. Last year we did for the issue 5, but we crowdfunded only part expense for it, and the other part was paid by Gacy. So we do all these things. In order to afford all there's only so much you can pay from your pocket, right?
That's true.
In order to afford all this, that's when we kind of started doing offline events. It was started by, what do I say, by fluke, or it just fell on our lap, kind of a thing. 2012 Mumbai Pride, there was no one to do an open mic, and I was really keen on doing open mic because I always felt that open mics were like the extension of the blog, right? What you write up there,
That's true.
You speak of it offline. So it just fell. So we wanted to do, we thought, and I pulled in Anuja, who was at that time just been introduced to Gacy. So I pulled her in. I said, you have to help me. We thought that we will, just pay the money for the open mic. Then we realized that it's not about just putting in the money, but you have to organize it yourself. And then being a little fussy and particular about, whether it's the venue, the kind of conversations we would want there and things like that. So we put in a little more effort. We ran around, got venue, so we got Big Nasty, which was a very big thing, considering that it was a very commercial space in Bandra. Nobody had done events in commercial spaces like that.
Yeah.
You would usually hear events happening in some dingy corner of Andheri East or something like that. So for us,
and even there, they don't tell them that this is an
exactly
exhibit event. They're like, don't hang out outside because we'll find out.
Yeah. No, but that time I think even the press was kind of picking it up. So I still remember we used to get in Time Out a full feature on the Mumbai Pride, or I think it was even HT at that time we used to put it. So for us, the victory was like a 50% battle was won because we had a fantastic venue. Then it was more like, okay yaar, open mic जो पिछले 2 साल हुए थे वहाँ पे तो hardly 30-40 लोग ही आए हुए थे and all that. तो यहाँ पे 30-40 तो venue तो कभी हमारी शक्ल भी नहीं देखेगा.
So we were tell them like, we'll find this many people.
I mean, open mic was not a party. Right, where you would see, we are not Delhi, we are Bombay. There's only so much of activism we can take. So we thought that we had to make it sure that it comes across as very cool, entertaining space wherein you kind of sensitize the crowd without them even knowing it. Right,
in an urban context rather.
Exactly. And so we came out with a really funky poster. Whatever we thought we could do, we did that. And
on a creative side, you guys are like kicking it. I'm really I've always seen you all come up with something unique in terms of creatives or like in terms of content. So that's one thing, and shows that it's years of having done something very right. And then
I think it's also to do with we've got some really fantastic people and very creative, talented people on board, queer women on board. So we did that, and I remember telling Anuja that if we managed to get 50 people in that space, I would consider it like the best. Like we've done successful, and next day I'm going to go into Siddhivinayak and Chadao Peda and stuff like that. And she was like, chill, it's okay, it'll be fine and things like that. And
but let's backtrack a little bit. How was your sales pitch to the Big Nasty? Like you telling them
nothing. We just walked in and we said that I had been to that place before. In fact, they had served me some really bad food. So the manager was like really, really nice to me, and I told him, I said, so after this, so then the next time I went with my family, with friends and family, and we had a very good time. So the third time I was like, okay boss,
the food was better the second time.
It was good. The service was excellent. So I told him, we were pretty honest with him right from the start, saying that it is for the LGBT people and we would like to do this. We have no money to give you. I can't give you any minimum guarantee, nothing like that. But whatever press we can give you, we will, and I think you should come across as a very queer friendly space. And the guy was very good, very cooperative, and he immediately said yes. And that's how we got the space. So when on the day of the event, we were really nervous. But then we saw the space fill up in a matter of an hour, and we had over 150 people over there. And we had
it was the
crazy...
first time ever the Dirty Talk happened.
Yeah, and we had some good performances, so not some great. It was very badly organized. Too many things happening, but we had a lot of good things going on in the sense that it was, again, a very fun space. A lot of queer women. You know, people were drinking, laughing, enjoying the performances that were happening.
What were the kind of performances that were there?
We had stand-up. Again, we had Aditi Mittal at that time.
Yeah.
And then we had a couple of stand-ups from the queer community. Then we had music. We had a small skit. So a different kind of stuff.
Proper,
yeah, I mean, some were reading from their phone and things like that. So
Mixed
it
bag
was
of,
first timers. So it was pretty good. We had Rohini, RJ Rohini. She was the one, she hosted the very first Dirty Talk.
And she's still around. Like she was there for the last one I went to.
Yep. So she was, I mean, she's after that also, she was till the time she was in Bombay, she was hosting all the Dirty Talks. So we had her on board. She was fantastic. And then the surprise of all was Imran Khan, actor Imran Khan, landing up over there. And he was so sweet. He was there. I mean, he came before time. We got a little nervous that why is he there before time?
He's a strong ally as well.
Always. And it wasn't. He was supposed to be in Hyderabad for a shoot, and he managed to finish it early, and he landed up over there.
So sweet of him.
And he was there for almost till the end, and he just left at that time. And I still remember we had the CAM donation box. And I stood next to him and I said, whoever wants a picture with him has to put $100 in the box. And he was like all for it, and we
Proper
did that.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah. The whole marketing, Punjabi marketing business side kind of like kicked in.
And you got how much from that?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't remember the amount. But yeah, it was a free entry for everybody. So no money was coming from the entry fee. So we were taking the donation box and trying to get
Imran Khan as a scapegoat. But yeah, so as you said, like from there, obviously the offline events also grew, and now they're like very properly organized.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense, I mean, we learned with every Dirty Talk, we learned something new. You know.
Also, why Dirty Talk? What was the idea behind putting it out there? Like you want to be brash?
Because we wanted to talk queer conversations, and that time in society to talk anything queer was considered dirty. So we said, let's do Dirty Talk.
Yeah, it's very meta.
Yeah. So the whole idea was to bring out tabooed conversations out there, you know, into public domain kind of a thing. So that's why we called it, and it's pretty catchy, I feel. So
it is, yeah.
Yeah, so we're lucky to get that name.
So from there, how many people do you get now on an average at a Dirty Talk?
So it started with about 150 I mean, a lot depends on the venue size. So we've gone up to about 450 for a Dirty Talk.
Nice. When I was there, how many people were there?
Around 400.
Oh yeah. So to all our listeners, I've had the rare privilege of being at a Dirty Talk open mic, and the ambience and the energy in that room is madness. I have not danced in a very long time, like the way I danced at the after party. And like I know everybody knows about it by now, and those who don't know, you have to go to the next one. When is it? The next one?
Hopefully in September.
Okay, hopefully in September. That's you're really like pulling it across, like stretching it so like you actually make people yearn for it. You know, that's what I feel.
Yeah, I mean, see, the thing is, so it started with Dirty Talk, right? That's when we got our taste of first offline event. But even then, you know, I was very particular about doing very limited number of offline initiatives because my focus was always on the blog. For me, that was the prime.
That actually drive the focus towards the literary work that you were doing on the side.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the first Dirty Talk just happened. It's not that we got money and all that, but we enjoyed doing that. Yeah. And that was the reason why we did the next one. And we continue to do, because it's something that we really enjoy. It's very tiresome, very, very, very taxing, considering that for all three of us, now we have three of us, you know, it's handling day job and doing this on the side. So it gets very taxing. But then with time, we also wanted to do offline initiatives with something to do with creativity. You know, so that's what we did. So, but there, like I said, there is only so much you can do, you know, when you have a lot of other things to juggle with. And we are someone, like, you know, we won't do things for the heck of it. If we do it, we need to put in everything, like everything. So therefore, we kind of do Dirty Talk now less. It depends if we have some other exciting projects that we can do. So then we kind of dip into that.
What are the other avenues that you all explored in the interim?
So we've over the years we've done quite a bit. You know, we've done so after Dirty Talk we did what? We've done bar nights. Bar nights started actually just last year. We've done trivia nights.
Bar nights are after the Pride mostly?
No, bar nights, we started last year, mid last year, so we've had about 4 bar nights till now.
And these are exclusively for LBT women?
LBT women. I mean, the focus is LBT women.
And they can get a guy along?
Yeah.
I once asked Anuja, by the way, I'm like, I don't have any females in my life, what do I do? She's like, it's okay for you.
Yeah, you can always introduce you. No harm. We don't bite. So what we've done is we've done trivia nights, we have done film screenings, we have done book readings. So we have this entity called Read Out Loud. So we kind of do book club meeting kind
Queer
of a thing.
literature usually, or like all
I mean,
kinds?
depends. We've done, I mean, obviously queer is the focus in it, but we kind of digress here, there and all that. We've produced a theatre piece with Patchworks called Tape the King of Drag, which was probably the first drag king theatre performance.
And drag king is something that we hardly get to see in India also.
Exactly.
And,
So if it happens also, it's like in remote villages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we kind of brought it to the forefront again. So we've done, we've dabbled with
So much.
couple of things. Couple of things.
All right, so let's take a small break here. We need a breather after listening to so much of what you've done as a unit, and we'll go to what you look forward to doing now with the brand that you have, and also about the LGBT community in India.
Cool.
We'll be back soon.
Hey friend, so if you're listening to a podcast right now, you're probably some kind of a nerd. A nerd at heart, at least. So maybe, just maybe, you might like another podcast about nerds, by nerds, and for nerds.
It's called Geek Fruit, a community to unite estranged geeks from across India and later on the world. We talk about television, movies, science fiction, adventure, fantasy, etc. Anything nerdy, it's all here on Geek Fruit. You can catch a fresh episode every Monday and a Retcon episode every Tuesday.
And you can check us out on iTunes, Audioboom, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. Like my favorite podcast app, the IVM podcast app. Give me my money, IVM.
Good plug.
Happy listening, you nerds.
Back again on Keeping It Queer, and before we go to anything else, I wanted to first of all look at how the magazine got started, because this, again, like queer magazines, nobody really knows. Bombay Dose was a thing which was like, people would have a small circulars on, at the stands, and but a full-blown magazine with proper pictures and the whole GQ effect was given to the magazine. So how did that come about?
The magazine was something that me and Priya dabbled with back in 2011.
And when did Priya join you? I'm sorry.
Priya joined in 2009. She was there till 10. Then she went overseas to work. And then when she came back...
The family reckoned.
No. Don't think so. It was like that. It was something, I mean, we just thought about it. It was, we never thought that it is something that will become big or... on those lines, but at that point in time it was like, how to us it was more like, okay, internet is still very urban privilege kind of a thing.
Enough.
Yeah, I mean, it was a privilege, right? Back in 2009, 2010, and we were like, so how do we send our content and send these conversations trickle down to smaller towns, smaller cities, because back then internet was not that freely available. So what we thought is we took a couple of best pieces from the blog back in that day. We got another girl called Karishma on board, who is a visual designer, and she designed this small little booklet kind of a thing, which was in a way best of Gacy back then. And we got...
The omnibus edition.
Yeah, we got 200 digital copies printed, put in money from our pocket, and we just shipped them out.
Correct.
Whatever NGO we could find online that dealt with gender and sexuality, whether it was, or a library, anything that we thought was even remotely queer friendly, we sent a copy to them.
All digital.
All digital. They were digitally printed.
Okay.
They were not the offset printing, they were digital, so they were expensive. We could afford only 200 copies, and we shipped them out. So the first month or so, it was, I remember in Bombay that time we had Azad Bazaar. So we went and gave them some couple of copies, and people would send pictures for them and all that.
Whatever happened to that?
Yeah, I think you should. It was a fun space. I mean, we really miss Azad Bazaar.
Bring Azad Bazaar back.
Yeah.
Please, let's hashtag that.
But the main effect of that, what we saw was after a month or two when, we started getting emails from smaller cities. I still remember we got an email from Siliguri back then. Then I think from Mysore, we got emails saying that, they landed upon the zine, and we were like, we didn't even send it there. How did it travel that way?
Siliguri of all places.
Yeah, I mean, how did it travel? I mean, I don't think we even sent it to Northeast. How did it travel there? And and the fact that those whoever sent in the email, for them it was more like just good to know that there were other people like them, and there are spaces, and there is a book like that for them to read. So that
I'm so jealous of a magazine who's been to Northeast and I haven't been yet.
So for us it was very, very encouraging, and we thought that okay, ye 3-4 emails aaye to matlab at least the thought that we put behind it, the reason.
If 3-4 people have bothered to reply or send a mail, then maybe more people are reading.
Not more about reading, but at least it kind of stayed true to our intent, which was that we want to start these conversations, we want to send this information down to smaller
effect was obviously happening.
Exactly. So that's when we said, okay, we should look at it more seriously.
Correct.
And then the next year we did the second edition, but the second edition, what we did was we put a call out saying that send us your stories, and the best ones we picked and we put it
Awesome. So, and did you have like a limit on the stories, or how exactly was it?
No, limit was on the budget. यार जितना पैसा उतनी की copy print कर सकते हैं.
Exactly.
It
the
was,
font छोटा करके squeeze कर.
It was actually बहुत छोटी थी. The book, it's kind of grown in size over the years. And then the third happened, and then the fourth happened, and then the fifth happened, and from the third and the fourth were crowdfunded.
And on an average, how many entries were you getting from people?
For the last one, for the fifth issue that we came out in Jan this year, during Mumbai Pride, in fact. So the topic, this time we kept a theme, in fact. It was on queer desires, realm of queer desires, and we got over 60 entries. Nice. Out of which our zine editor, Miss Priya Gangwani, just selected, I think, 3. And 3 or 4, yeah. She's very particular about the kind of content she wanted in. And then she went on with curation and things like that. And the thing is that, this magazine, we put it out in a matter of 4 months. This is with full-time jobs.
Correct. The turnaround time has to be
I mean, me and Anuja were not that much involved. We are more involved in the marketing and the selling aspect of it. It's basically for this particular show, Priya and Karishma, they both were the ones. So one is sitting in Singapore and one is sitting in Bombay. And they both produced this fantastic issue. It is basic. If you look at the 5th issue, it is exactly what we wanted back then when we started the zine. In terms of the look, the feel, the size, the kind of content that we wanted in. So it's like it took us 5 issues to get there.
So if somebody has to buy it, how would they
can come on the blog and they can buy it. You can find it on www.gacyfamily.com.
And you ship it to them.
And we ship it to them.
Nice. So
we do international shipping also.
Because we need to get the stories out. But I was also talking about, like, if 3 stories make it, then what about the remaining 67?
We send them apology emails.
But shouldn't they go somewhere? Like, I think some place like a archives section just for like.
We do that. Yeah? We publish them on the blog. But like I said, it's about growing with every issue as well. So the kind of conversations that we want. So how we'd go about it is the blog is something that we keep it very casual, very personal, very intimate. We are not very fussy about who is sharing the story, the language that is used, things. As long as it's readable, it makes sense to the one who's reading it. It's good with us.
And you go through all of them?
We go through all of them.
So which is your favorite story of all time that really hit you?
I love coming out stories. Okay. I feel that I can never be tired of coming out stories.
Because it's so, like, you think that maybe everything will be the same for everybody, but it's not. The perspective that everybody comes with.
It's not. Yeah. And even if it's not a good coming out story, but then you feel that, that there is always light at the end of the tunnel.
And when the person persevered and like was brave enough to do that,
yeah,
I think kudos
mean,
to them.
and it's very encouraging. It's very motivating. And today, you know, and coming out stories are not always just limited to your immediate family, right? It's about to your friend, to your relatives, to
it's a
at
battle that never
workspace.
gets over.
I feel that we gays have to come out till the very end, till we go to our grave. Yeah, every other day we are coming out to someone
come
or
out
the other.
with a coffin and be like, hey guys, let me just die in peace now.
Yeah. For instance, if it's not written on the grave that this person is queer, it's like
Yeah,
you'll
like-
still be told that this one was gay. So you'll be coming out for a very, very, very long time. So I mean, I personally enjoy all coming out stories. Coming back to the zine. So when it comes to the zine, it's like we feel that we need to grow as well in terms of our own sensibilities, in terms of our own conversations, and that's what we try to do with the magazine. Move away from what is being spoken already, or no longer dabble on any topic on a superficial level, kind of like go deep in it or give it a different angle or a perspective and things like that. And that's what we've done with the 5th issue as well. If you see, it talks about desire, but not desire of one person wanting another person or the physical aspect of it. That's what first comes to mind, right? When you talk about desire, it's about desiring someone else's body.
Sensual, like some kind of like a Dear Diary today. That kind of thing.
Yeah, so we have some very fun pieces which talk about sensual, but it also talks about desiring your own body, you know, looking at other things that you desire, you know, and therefore I feel this is probably our best issue out there.
Awesome, I'll check it out definitely. But I want to touch upon the fact that we discussed before getting to recording, is that nobody talks about this abuse also sometimes within queer relationships. And how do you think you can tackle such a topic?
I think these conversations are now coming. See, that's what internet does, right? So it's very easy. I mean, it's made it easy for information from what is happening outside of India to come to us, right? The conversations that are happening outside of India, you know, for us to pick them up over here, see how well they fit in our social context. So, for instance, as something as simple as consent, I would say we've started talking about consent, in the last 2 years?
Yeah.
Right?
The word's become like a trending topic now.
Yeah. Before that, no one spoke. And then consent also has been spoken much with in the heterosexual context, right? Not in the queer context. Many people even get surprised, you know, that acha, idhar bhi consent chahiye hota. Consent is necessary.
I like how everybody assumes it's a jigsaw puzzle that everything just fits together. There has to be some kind of...
And it gets more funny because when you talk about, you know, queer women relationships and consent playing a part over there, so people get even more acha, ladkiyon mein bhi consent ka acha wo funda hota hai. I mean, people forget to see that, you know, all relationships, it's consent is a very everyday thing. So how we play in it is we started the conversation online, you know, with having pieces on consent. You know, we started talking about where it says only yes means yes. So it's no more like no means no, it's actually yes means yes. Right? So till you don't say yes, it's not a yes. So what we did was when we started with our bar nights, we kind of decided that we didn't want it to be just another, you know, come party, drink kind of a place. I mean, we don't do...
then find the right corner.
Exactly. But because, you know, like I said earlier also that, you know, we try to do as many creative initiatives as possible. So just a plain bar night, party night didn't appeal much to us. So what we thought that we would use that space utilize those spaces, having conversations that you would have probably within your closed doors among your friends, but not in social spaces.
Correct.
So the whole topic of consent, you know, we started in our bar nights where we got really good participation of women asking questions, us talking about it.
So it was not all about the booze at some point. There was conversations.
No. The booze. It was after the little booze and little music, and like, you know, we kind of told people, okay, let's get into this.
Now let's get serious.
Yeah, now let's
Party's
get
over. Doors are locked. Now you forget how to talk about
it. Was more like, अच्छा party पे जाना है तो जल्द पहले ये बात खत्म कर लो. So yeah, so we we had 2-3 people who spoke about it. We had it became more of an audience participation, you know, audience led initiative. So we let the conversation flow as per what people are talking.
Well, sometimes what happens is many queer events, there's always some people just talking, and then others are the spectators who want to say something, but they're always held back. I think that's one major difference between most Gazy events and other queer events, is that there's engagement and everybody's given a chance to kind of communicate their ideas.
We try to do that.
And you've achieved that. Take my word on it.
Thank you.
No, the very fact that I could, like, for the longest time, I was always skeptical about how, if I am put in a entire queer scenario, like, you know, my entire audience is just gay, how would my material stand up? Because I am usually like trying to be this crusader to the gay, to the straight folks, you know, telling them that there's gay people in the country and all that. But that sometimes I don't want to like put on an act. I just want to genuinely talk to them. But when I did the queer event, and I got to go on stage, first of all, thank you, Sakshi. And I had the best time of my life performing, and I knew that for a fact that I belong. So I think that's what matters, right? When people talk and somebody reciprocates, and there's this kind of this sense of understanding and belonging, that's what matters for me.
I mean, we keep it fun, keep it casual. Like I said, you know, it's about sensitizing people without them even knowing about it, or you know, without slapping it on their face, kind of thing. Exactly. So with our bar nights, we've done that. So whether it was about consent or something as casual as about how would you ask a woman out in a social space, like let's take it in a bar or something like that, and we had funny anecdotes about it, and people talking.
Give us one of those.
I can't remember one now.
But what is your favorite technique of asking someone out? Like if you were to,
I actually don't.
Why?
I don't. But I do hang around that person. So it's like one way or the other.
It's a bumblebee approach.
Yeah. It's like acha abhi dekh, palat kind of a thing. So yeah, and but also the fact that when you say you run Gacy, it kind of stands out.
You must have heard of it if you haven't. There's more by that case. But I was like, so right now is Sakshi single, or what's the situation?
Right now single, yeah. Right now just mingling with Gacy, that's all.
So ladies, we're taking entries. Sakshi is now shortlisting, like 60 people will send in, we'll take 3.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the end of the episode. Sakshi, before we leave, what would you like to tell other young women who are out there in questioning and like who are still unsure about their orientation? What would you tell them?
I would just say that, don't feel so bogged down about coming out. Take your time. You don't owe it to anybody. Talk more. There are a lot of people out there to talk about. There are a lot of, I won't say a lot, but there are spaces out there where you can meet more queer people. So take your time, understand it, feel confident, and, then step out of the closet, because that's how, if you're confident, that's how...
Yeah, be sure about it.
Not sure about it. I feel that if the more confident you are about your sexuality, the better people receive it. It's as simple as that, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, or anybody. So if they see that you're not questioning, you're not crying, and you're not going crazy over it, so they have no reason. Yeah, so for them also, there is no reason to do that.
Yeah. Right? So that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Sakshi, for coming.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And for all the listeners, please check out Gazy. They are doing some great work, and they have a blog, they have a Facebook page. They are all over the social media. And September, Dirty Talk is happening. You might just catch me again.
Fingers crossed, huh?
Yes.
Keep your fingers crossed.
I'll be dancing for sure. I'll be there to dance because I love the after party. Anyways, that brings us again to the end. And thank you, Sakshi, again. Goodbye.
Bye. Take care.
Yeah. Well, if you enjoyed the show, you can listen to more of it on any of the podcasting apps you like. You can look out for us on Audio Boom, Pocket Cast, Stitcher, Beyond Pod. But if you're looking for us on the iTunes India store, you might have a bit of a trouble finding us because of the language used on the show. So be sure to change your location and then listen to us. For now, it's me, Naveen Narona, signing off. Goodbye. Thank you so much. And please continue keeping it queer.
एक्सक्यूज मी भैया, एक्सक्यूज मी.
बोलिए मैडम.
मेन्यू में क्या है?
मेन्यू में सीन अनसीन है, पॉडकास्ट है, ऑन कोर्स है, साइरस है, मेड इन इंडिया, रीडिस्कवरी प्रोजेक्ट, एम्पावरिंग सीरीज, सेक्स वेक्स है, IVM लाइक्स है, सिंप्लीफाइड है, कीपिंग इट क्वियर है, ड्रिंक्स एंड डेस्टिनेशंस है, माय नेबर सकरबर्ग है और द फैन गराज है. आपको क्या चाहिए?
एक बार रिपीट कर देंगे क्या?
रिपीट नहीं करता हम. आप जाओ IVMpodcast.com पे और सुनो ये सब, या फिर डाउनलोड करो उनका ऐप. सब आपकी उंगलियों पे.